September 2025, Mr. Zulkarnain Abdul Rahim asked the minister responsible for the PDPA a simple question. When someone requests their own CCTV footage under the Personal Data Protection Act, must the organisation preserve that footage while the request is being processed? Minister Josephine Teo's answer was clear. Yes, organisation must have the appropriate measure to preserve the request data. There are criminal penalties for intentional disruption to avoid an access request. That was said in Parliament on the 22nd of September 2025. By then, my footage had already been deleted. This is what happened when I made my request. I was riding my motorcycle on Cairnhill Road when a taxi cut into my lane. The taxi driver gave the first account. He said I had skied on my own. I had no memory to contradict him. The diagnosis came later. A subarachnoid haemorrhage, bleeding around the brain. I had no memory of what happened to me, not the impact, not the minutes before, nothing. What I know was this: 2 condominiums flanked the road where the accident happened. Both had CCTV cameras pointing at the street. When security guards checked the footage, they identified it within minutes. They described to me what had happened. I was then asked to make a formal request to the management. So I did, starting with the Scotts Tower because that was the more direct front view of the accident. The taxi cutting into my lane was on video. It exists. It was findable. That footage was the only record of an event I have no memory of. I need it for 2 reasons. 1, to understand what happened to me, and to prove that I did not ski on my own. 2, to support an insurance claim against the driver. Both seem straightforward. Both were not. 4 days after the accident, I walked into the management office of the Scotts Tower. I explained what happened. I asked for the CCTV footage of the road. They said no, privacy reason. I asked who the data protection officer was. They won't tell me. I asked what company managed the building. They won't tell me that either. I asked who I could escalate to. No answer. I left the building with no company name, no TPO contact, and no escalation path. I had to identify the managing agent myself. I had to track down the DPO myself. The other condominium, suite at Cairnhill, began differently. Staff there had allowed me to take a short recording of the CCTV screen, not through the PDPA process, just a brief recording because they could see why I need to understand what had happened. After PDPC ignored my request for the more direct front footage of the Scotts Tower, I later tried the other angle. I made a formal request to suite at Cairnhill for fuller footage. I did not say who had helped me earlier. I was trying to protect the staff. The managing agent DPO then refused in writing. On the 21st of May 2024, he wrote, only by police direct or order the MCSD to disclose the footage, that MCSD is obliged to do so. This is not what PDPC's own guidelines say. The guidelines for management cooperation say access may not be limited to enforcement agencies, such as the police. I wrote back, citing these guidelines. The DPO replied, it seems to me you are having difficulty understanding our position. And he refused to communicate with me further. Neither condominium cite a single ground from the law. The PDPA lists the only legal reason a request can be refused, Section 21, Subsection 3, and the fee schedule. Privacy as a blanket reason is not on their list. Police only access is not on their list. And later, the short recording from Suite Cairnhill, the one I had taken only because staff helped me, was used by PDPC to say the footage was not personal data. While I was trying to find out who managed the building, the clock was running. At first, I was told the footage was kept for many months. That was my understanding. So when Night Friend later said no footage had been captured, I became alarmed. Because I know that was not true. Security guard had already identified the footage. They had described what happened. That was when I began to suspect the problem was not that the footage did not exist. The problem was access could be denied until the footage disappeared. A new management team later claimed the retention cycle was 20 to 30 days. PDPC eventually said 17 days and accepted that figure without verifying it. 17 days, that was the window. And that date mattered. PDPC later treated Night Friend requests to the MCSD as the access request date. Then it treated auto deletion as happening before the MCSD formal refusal. Under that logic, Section 22A became useless. The footage could disappear during the live access process, and deletion was still not treated as a breach. I was still trying to find out the company name on day 4. So I did what the law says to do. I filed a formal complaint with the Personal Data Protection Commission. For the Scotts Tower, I explained the verbal refusal on April 17th. My written follow-up on the April 25th. the missing company name, the missing DPO contact, and the claim that no footage had been captured. At that point, I did not know PDPC will later say the footage had already been overwritten on April 30. What I didn't know was this: the footage had been identified. Knight Frank's no footage claim was false, and I was worried that the Scott Towers MCSD or Knight Frank could deny access by letting the video disappear. I told PDPC that PDPC did not preserve or verify the more direct front footage. Instead, I was told to go to the police. Only after that did I try the other angle from Streets Cairnhill. When its managing agent refused on the police-only ground, I filed that complaint with PDPC as well. And then, nothing meaningful. No preservation action, no verification. Instead, PDPC came up with reasons on behalf of the condominiums without checking the core facts. And none of those reasons addressed what the condominiums had actually said. The Scotch Tower had said privacy, there are no footage. Suites at Cairnhill had said police-only access. Months passed. Eventually, there was a response, but not the one the law seems to promise. My Member of Parliament intervened. Twice. PDPC did not move. I appealed. PDPC did not change its position. Not on privacy, not on police-only, not on deletion. After I proved the data had been deleted, and the police confirmed that they had no video either, PDPC only defection had ran out. They had no other reasons to reject me. What they did instead was open some kind of investigation into TST's data deletion. I did not know what obligation it was open under. I do not know what they look at. I just know it was not the right I had asked about. That is the pattern. The right to retrieve my own data was treated not as worth investigating. The deletion of that same data after it was gone was treated as worth investigating. Eventually, PDPC issued its findings. 2 cases, 2 sets of reasoning. For Streets at Cairnhill, they said the CCTV footage did not contain personal data. Here is how they made that determination. They relied on my own evidence, a short handphone recording of the CCTV screen, taken at the management office after staff had helped me view what their camera captured. The recording exists because staff helped me. I did not disclose their earlier help when I later made a formal request because I did not want to get the staff into trouble. But later, PDPC used that recording against me. PDPC said the rider was only a silhouette, no facial features, no motorcycle license plate, therefore not personal data. But that's not what the statute said. The PDPA does not say a face or license plate must be visible. It defines personal data as data about an individual who can be identified from that data or from that data or other information. And there were other information. The guards had identified the footage within minutes. The request gave the date, time, place, and who I was. The whole reason I was asking was because that camera captured my accident. Identifiability, not clarity. This is the moment to understand. PDPC took my own evidence, used it against me, and the test they applied, the clarity test, does not exist in legislation. It was invented by the regulator to dismiss my case. In football, there is a famous goal scored by Diego Maradona. His hand made contact with the ball. The referee missed it. The goal stood. Afterwards, Maradona called it the hand of God. PDPC's clarity test is the regulatory equivalent. They scored a goal with something never in the rules. The legal test was identifiability. They replaced it with visual clarity. Then they declared victory and moved on. Let me show you what PDPC did side by side. First condominium, street at Cairnhill. The DPO said only by police direct order the MCSDs to disclose the footage. PDPC said the footage contains no personal data. The condominium never said that. PDPC invented the reason for them. Second condominium, the Scotch Tower. I made a verbal request on April 17. I was refused on privacy grounds and given no DPO contact, no company name, no escalation path. On April 25th, I followed up in writing. When challenged, they later claimed no footage exists. That was false. PDPC's own decision says the footage exists until April 30th. But PDPC's preservation analysis did not give legal weight to either of those earlier events. Not the 17 April verbal refusal by managing agent, not my April 25th written access request. Instead, the timeline shifted to what happened inside the condominium. The managing agent asked the MCSD on April 29, the footage was overwritten on April 30th, the formal refusal came on May 2nd. That is the twist. My request disappears. The managing agent's earlier refusal disappears. The false no footage statement disappears. The warning that the footage might be deleted disappears. And S22A becomes useless, because deletion before the formal refusal becomes no breach. In both cases, PDPC substituted their own reasoning for what the condominiums actually said, and in neither case did they test the actual state grounds against the law with a fee schedule? These are the only provisions that authorize an organization to lawfully refuse an access request. Privacy is not listed. Police only is not listed. PDPC never check. I wrote the PDPC with 9 questions, specific legal questions across 6 sessions of the PDPA. Which session authorized the clarity test? Why were condominiums' actual reasons never tested against the fee schedule? Why did the April 17 verbal refusal not matter? Why did my April 25th written request not trigger preservation before the footage disappeared? Why did many months, what security told me, become 17 days? Why was a request handled by the managing agent treated as legally different from the MCST's own responsibility? When Section 4, Subsection 2, removes most direct obligation from the data intermediary, and Section 4, Subsection 3, put the same obligation back on the organization as if it processed the data itself. Those questions were never answered. There was a repeated line. The guidelines are not determinative. The PDPA take precedence. But that does not answer the question. It does not say which section of the PDPA. It does not say what the conflict is. And when PDPC did try to answer a limited point, like the definition of personal data, they did not explain the original reasoning. They introduced a new idea, reasonableness, as if identifiability depends on whether it is reasonable to identify me from the footage. But the security guard had already found the footage within minutes. They knew the date, they knew the time, they knew the location, they knew who is asking. This is real-world identifiability that PDPC did not. The written findings were eventually released. When I posed questions on the reasoning, PDPC did not answer on the merits. Months later, more reasonings appeared, including a reasonableness gloss on identifiability, without explaining the original gap. PDPC also declined to publish the report online promptly. That only happened after I escalated. On June 23, 2025, PDPC wrote, "Decision and undertakings are generally published on the microsite within the year. We are unable to commit to a fixed date at this point." So the public could not see the reasoning. My questions were not answered on the merit, the findings were not promptly on public record, and PDPC treated the matter closed. But the TSD investigation had already proven that the data had been deleted. That was no longer in dispute. Even so, the officer handling my case continued with flawed reasoning for my suit complaint, closing it on the basis that it was similar to TSD. That could not stand. TSD was wrong. Saying suit was similar to a wrong decision was not a reason at all. I asked for the decision to be reopened. What I got in return was rude and unbecoming behavior expected of a civil servant. I did not want to complain about PDPC. I went there because I need my footage. In September 2024, I escalated to IMDA. I emailed Mr. Liu Cheng-Hong, IMDA's chief executive. I copied the PDPC commissioner, and because I did not know which department will handle my feedback, I sent an email to 3 IMDA branches at the same time. The complaint ran for 7 months. I sent 12 emails. The last was on the 14th of August. During the IMDA investigation, my complaint was leaked back to the PDPC officers under review. On the 20th of August 2025, Ms. Yong Wan Ling, IMDA's head of internal audit, wrote to me. Her finding: PDPC and its officers did not commit any wrongful practices. She endorsed PDPC's reasoning. She said PDPC had directed me to inform the police to avoid interfering with police investigation. That was a stated rationale for why nothing was wrong. That rationale did not exist in the PDPA. The only grounds for refusing access are Section 21, Subsection 3, and the fee schedule. Active police investigation is not listed. It was an excuse. IMDA endorsed it. IMDA also said PDPC had acted in accordance with its protocols, and it identified certain areas of improvement without naming them. The findings were final and conclusive. The investigation was closed. By this point, I stopped asking whether my case was handled wrongly. I started asking a different question. How many cases like mine has PDPC ever found a breach on? This website used to let you filter enforcement decisions by obligation type. At some point, that filter disappeared. So I went through the entire register myself, every decision, every finding, 384 cases compiled as of June 2026. The access obligation, Section 21 of the PDPC, the right of the citizens to access their own personal data, had produced 0 breach findings. 0. Across 384 published enforcement action, not one. The dominant pattern of PDPC enforcement is data protection and consent. Organizations mishandling data they hold. The right of a citizen to retrieve their own data from an organization, that is the least enforced provision in the entire register. Across those 384 cases, only 2 involve a complainant demanding access to their own CCTV data and being refused. Both are mine. Both from the same accident at Cairnhill Road. Both dismissed without a finding that an access obligation. was breached. The clarity test explains this. If face or license plate must be visible for CCTV footage to qualify as personal data, and the standard exists nowhere in the statute, then any organisation can deny an access request by asserting the footage is too unclear, and the complainant has no tools to challenge that assertion. After the 1986 World Cup quarter-final, Maradona was asked about his goal. He said, "It was a bit the hand of God, and a bit the head of Maradona. Not quite admitting, not quite denying." PDPC one-line reply, "The guidelines are not determinative. The PDPA take precedent. To 9 legal questions about the merits. Same energy. They cannot say what really happened, so they give the same non-answer to each question and declare the file closed." Here's what I learned going through every document, every decision, every response. Ordinary regulatory failure is uneven, mistakes in all different directions, inconsistent outcomes, different response to different challenges. What is documented here across 2 PDPC case and IMDA review, 9 legal questions, 384 enforcement actions is not uneven. Every decision at every level in the same direction. PDPC invented reasoning for the condominiums. IMDA stamped no wrongful practices without opening the envelope. 9 legal questions got 1 line. 0 breach findings across 384 cases. This is the shape of a policy. Not necessary and explicit one, nobody needs to have written it down. Here is the principle that distinguishes enforcement discretion from what happened here. Anybody can decide to actively enforce something or not, according to the circumstances of the day. There is a regulator's discretion. What nobody can do is actively decide to deny the rights of a citizen or resident and reinterpret the law to protect the perpetrators of their denial. That is what happened here. An active decision to deny and an active decision to reinvent grounds to justify the denial. The clarity test is the legal mechanism. The 0 breach history is the outcome. The non-engagement is what follows when the regulator cannot defend its position on the merits. I built a site, pdpaaccessrights.sg. Every document is there. Both PDPC decision, the one that found no personal data using my own handphone video, and the one that reframed a deleted footage case as an accountability breach. The Parliamentary answer from Minister Teo, promising preservation and penalties, next to what happened in my case. The 9 legal questions and the same line, the enforcement register analysis, 384 cases, 0 access obligation for breach findings. The timeline, the contradiction, the documented failures. Everything on the site comes from a PDPC decision. The PDPA statute, a parliamentary record, or correspondence in my possession. Nothing is asserted that is not source. Every claim has a footnote. Every source is primary. The evidence is public. You can check it yourself. I am not a lawyer. I am not an MP. I am a citizen who asked for the footage of an accident that erased his memory and found that the right that the law promised me did not exist in practice. The access obligation has produced 0 breach findings across over a decade of PDPC enforcement. 0. Across 384 published cases. If a statutory right has never been enforced at once, is it being enforced at all? And if not, by what mechanism and by whom is it being rendered unenforceable? All the evidence is at pdpaaccessrights.sg. Check it yourself.